The bullet whizzed past her ear so close that Margaret Rose heard the air split before the crack of the gunshot reached her. And in that fraction of a second, before terror seized her completely, she thought how absurd it was that she would die on a dusty California road just 3 days before her 21st birthday. The stagecoach lurched violently as another shot rang out, this time splintering the wooden frame above her head. Margaret's traveling companion, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hendricks, let out a piercing shriek as the coach careened wildly. The driver's voice rose in panic, shouting commands at the horses that went unheeded. Through the window, Margaret could see riders bearing down on them, their faces obscured by bandanas, their revolvers glinting in the harsh afternoon sun of 1878. The coach hit a rut and tilted dangerously. Margaret grabbed for the leather strap, her gloved fingers slipping on the worn surface. Mrs. Hendricks tumbled against her, all elbows and bonnet, her screaming never ceasing. The world became a chaos of dust, gunfire, and the thunder of hooves on packed earth. Then came the sound that made Margaret's heart drop into her stomach, the driver's body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The horses, now without guidance, veered sharply off the road. The coach swayed, tipped, and then there was nothing but spinning sky and ground, until everything crashed to a halt in an explosion of splintering wood and breaking glass. Margaret found herself hanging sideways, held in place by her seat. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, warm and sticky. Mrs. Hendricks lay motionless across from her, and Margaret's stomach clenched with fear for the woman. The bandits were shouting now, their voices growing closer. She could hear their boots hitting the ground as they dismounted. "Check inside," one voice commanded, rough and mean. "Might be something worth taking besides the strongbox." Margaret's hands trembled as she tried to free herself from the wreckage. Her traveling dress, already covered in dust from the journey, was now torn at the sleeve. She managed to pull herself upright just as a face appeared in the broken window, leering at her with yellowed teeth and eyes that made her skin crawl. "Well, well," the bandit said, reaching through to grab her arm. "Looks like we got ourselves a bonus, boys." Margaret tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Another pair of hands joined the first, and they began dragging her through the window. Glass cut into her palms. She kicked and fought, but they were too strong, too many. 3 of them now surrounding her, their laughter mixing with Mrs. Hendricks's renewed screaming from inside the coach. "Leave her be," one of them said, not out of kindness but possession. "I saw her first." "We share everything, Coltrane," another argued. They were still arguing when the first shot rang out from somewhere behind them. It was different from their wild firing, this one precise and purposeful. One of the bandits grabbing Margaret spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. The others released her and went for their guns, turning to face this new threat. Margaret stumbled backward, falling against the overturned coach. Through the settling dust, she saw him. He sat astride a gray horse, tall in the saddle, with a rifle still raised to his shoulder. His hat was pulled low, but she could see the set of his jaw, the calm determination in his posture. He wore a dusty coat over a simple shirt, and there was something about the way he held himself that spoke of quiet competence. "Ride off," he said, his voice carrying across the distance without shouting. "Ride off now, and you keep your lives." The bandits, 5 in total now that Margaret could count them, spread out. Their leader, a heavy-set man with a scar running down his cheek, laughed. "That is mighty generous of you, stranger, but I count 5 of us and 1 of you. Maybe you should be the one riding off." The stranger's rifle shifted slightly, now aimed at the leader. "I've got 6 shots in this rifle and 6 more in my pistol. That leaves me 6 bullets to spare, assuming you can hit anything. Your man there with the shoulder wound might have an opinion on that." Margaret watched the standoff, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. The bandits were calculating, weighing their chances. The stranger sat motionless, patient as stone. Then one of the bandits made his move, going for his gun with a speed born of practice. The stranger's rifle cracked, and the man's hat flew off his head, the bullet passing so close it must have singed his scalp. Before any of them could react, the stranger had his pistol out, the rifle somehow already back in its saddle holster, though Margaret had not seen him move. "Next one goes lower," the stranger said. The wounded bandit was already stumbling toward his horse, clutching his shoulder and leaving a trail of blood in the dust. Another followed, then another. The scarred leader held his ground for a moment longer, his pride warring with his survival instinct. "You have made an enemy today," he said. "Add yourself to the list," the stranger replied. The leader spat in the dust, then turned and walked deliberately to his horse, refusing to run. He mounted with studied casualness, then looked at the stranger one more time. "I will remember your face. I am sure you will." The bandits rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving Margaret standing alone by the wreckage of the stage. For a long moment, the stranger remained motionless, watching until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did he holster his pistol and dismount, moving toward her with long, easy strides. Up close, he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and dust coated his dark hair where it showed beneath his hat. He looked at her with concern, his gaze taking in the cut on her forehead, her torn dress, her shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Margaret opened her mouth to answer and found she could not speak. The terror of the last minutes caught up with her all at once, and her knees buckled. He caught her before she fell, his arms strong and steady. "Easy now," he said. "You are safe, I have got you." She found herself leaning against him, her face pressed to his dusty coat, breathing in the scent of leather and sage and something else, something uniquely him. His heart beat steady beneath her ear, and that steadiness helped calm her own racing pulse. "Mrs. Hendricks," she finally managed. "She is still in the coach." He helped her to sit on a relatively flat piece of the wreckage, then went to check on her companion. Margaret watched as he carefully extracted the elderly woman from the coach. Mrs. Hendricks was conscious but dazed, with a nasty bruise forming on her temple. "Nothing broken," he reported, helping Mrs. Hendricks to sit beside Margaret, "but she should see a doctor." "The driver," Margaret said, his expression told her what she needed to know before he spoke. "I am sorry." Margaret closed her eyes. She had not known the driver's name, had only exchanged pleasantries with him at the last way station. It seemed wrong that he should die without her even knowing what to call him. "Where were you headed?" the stranger asked. "Hangtown," Margaret said. "I am to teach at the school there." "That is another 15 miles. He looked at the destroyed coach, at the two women, at the sun already beginning its descent toward the horizon. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. You can rest there tonight, and tomorrow I will take you into town." "We cannot impose," Margaret began, but Mrs. Hendricks interrupted. "We most certainly can impose," the older woman said, her voice shaky but firm. "Young lady, this man just saved our lives. If he is offering shelter, we accept gratefully." The stranger almost smiled. "I will need to bury the driver first. There should be some water and provisions in the boot of the coach if it survived the crash." He was right. Margaret found a canteen and some wrapped sandwiches, though they were somewhat crushed. While the stranger saw to the grim task of burying the driver, she helped Mrs. Hendricks clean up and drink some water. The older woman's hands trembled as she held the canteen. "I thought we were done for," Mrs. Hendricks whispered. "Those men, the way they looked at you." She shuddered. "That young man is a blessing." Margaret's gaze drifted to where the stranger was working, his movements efficient and respectful as he prepared a grave. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel safer than she had felt since leaving Sacramento 3 days ago. When he finished, he stood for a moment over the grave, his hat held to his chest. Margaret could not hear the words he spoke, but she saw his lips move in what might have been a prayer. It touched something deep inside her, that simple show of respect for a man he had not known. He returned and surveyed the situation. "Mrs. Hendricks can ride my horse. Miss Rose, you will need to ride with me." "How did you know my name?" Margaret asked, startled. He gestured to the scattered luggage from the coach. One of her trunks had burst open, spilling her carefully packed belongings across the ground. Among them lay several books, each with her name inscribed inside the cover. "Margaret Rose," he read from one that had landed nearby. "And I am Owen Harper." The name fit him, she thought. Solid and straightforward. They gathered what they could salvage from the wreckage. Most of Margaret's belongings were ruined or too scattered to recover, but Owen managed to secure one trunk and her carpet bag to his horse. He helped Mrs. Hendricks into the saddle with gentle care, then turned to Margaret. "You ever ridden before?" he asked. "Side saddle at my uncle's estate," she admitted. "But that was years ago. This will be different," he said, "but I will keep you safe." He mounted behind Mrs. Hendricks first, adjusting the stirrups and settling the older woman comfortably. Then he dismounted and climbed up again, this time extending his hand to Margaret. She took it, his palm rough and warm against hers, and let him pull her up behind him. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. Even through his coat, she could feel the solid warmth of him, the shift of his muscles as he gathered the reins. Her heart, which had finally slowed from its terrified gallop, picked up speed again for an entirely different reason. "Hold tight," he said, and she felt the words rumble through his chest against her cheek. They started off at a walk, Owen guiding the horse carefully over the rough terrain back to the road. Margaret had never been so close to a man before, not like this, with her body pressed against his back and her arms around him. It should have felt improper, scandalous even, but instead it felt necessary, natural, like the most sensible place in the world to be. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as they rode. Mrs. Hendricks dozed in the saddle ahead of them, held secure by Owen's careful positioning. Margaret watched the landscape roll by, the oak-dotted hills of California's gold country, the distant mountains purple against the evening sky. "Thank you," she said quietly, not sure if he could hear her over the steady clop of hooves. "No need for thanks," he replied. Could not very well ride past. Many men would have. Then many men are cowards. His matter-of-fact tone made her smile despite everything. "Are you always this modest about your heroism?" Now she felt rather than saw his slight smile. "Is it heroism to do what any decent person should do?" "Yes," she said simply. "Especially when most people are not decent." They rode in companionable silence for a while. Margaret found herself relaxing against him, her initial tension easing. The rhythmic motion of the horse, the warmth of Owen's body shielding her from the cooling evening air, the sheer relief of being alive and safe all combined to make her feel almost dreamlike. "What brings a schoolteacher from Sacramento to Hangtown?" Owen asked. "How do you know I am from Sacramento? Your trunk had a shipping label," she laughed softly. "You are very observant. It helps to pay attention in this country. I suppose it does." She paused, watching a hawk circle overhead. "My parents died of fever last winter." I was living with my uncle afterward, but he made it clear I was a burden. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Hangtown, it seemed like providence. No other family, none that wanted me. She was surprised at her own honesty. There was something about him that made her want to talk, to share the truths she usually kept locked away. What about you? Have you been ranching here long? 3 years. I saved my wages working cattle drives and bought the land from a family heading back east. It is not much, but it is mine. Pride colored his voice, and Margaret understood it. In a time and place where many people owned nothing, having land meant everything. You run cattle? She asked. Some. Mostly horses. I break and train them, sell them to the army and to ranchers. That must be dangerous work. No more dangerous than traveling by stagecoach, apparently. She laughed, genuinely laughed, and felt him relax a bit at the sound. The stars were beginning to emerge, pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. Margaret had never felt so aware of another person, so conscious of every breath and movement. Her hands were linked at his waist, and she could feel the worn leather of his belt, the soft fabric of his shirt where his coat had fallen open. We are almost there, Owen said as they crested a small rise. Below them, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it, sat a simple ranch house and barn. Lamplight glowed in one window, warm and welcoming. Horses moved in a corral, their dark shapes ghostly in the twilight. It was modest, as he had said, but well-maintained, with neat fences and what looked like a good water source. It is beautiful, Margaret said, and meant it. It will do, he replied, but she heard pleasure in his voice. As they approached, a dog began barking, a deep, friendly sound. A border collie came racing toward them, tail wagging furiously. Owen called out a greeting, and the dog circled them with joyful energy. That is Scout, Owen said. He is friendlier than he is useful, but he is good company. He pulled the horse to a stop near the house and dismounted, then helped Mrs. Hendricks down. The older woman swayed on her feet, and he steadied her with practiced ease. Then he reached up for Margaret. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her down. For a moment they stood close, her hands on his shoulders, his on her waist, and their eyes met in the lamplight spilling from the house. Something passed between them, a current of awareness that made Margaret's breath catch. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. I will get you both settled, he said. The house is not fancy, but it is clean. Inside, the ranch house was indeed simple but comfortable. One large room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a cast iron stove at the other. 2 doors led to what Margaret assumed were bedrooms. The furniture was rough-hewn but sturdy, and everything was remarkably tidy for a bachelor's home. Owen lit more lamps, flooding the space with warm light. You can have my room, he said to Margaret, then gestured to a settee near the fireplace. Mrs. Hendricks, that opens into a bed. I will sleep in the barn. We cannot take your bed, Margaret protested. You can and will. I have slept in worse places than a barn, believe me. He moved to the stove, checking the fire. I will heat some water for washing, and there is stew left from my dinner. It is not much, but you are welcome to it. He worked as he spoke, his movements efficient and sure. Margaret watched him, this stranger who had ridden into her life like something from a dime novel, and felt something shifting inside her. She had always been practical, level-headed, not given to flights of fancy. But sitting here in his home, watching him care for them with such quiet competence, she felt the first stirrings of something she had never experienced before. Mrs. Hendricks dozed in a chair while Owen heated water and Margaret cleaned the cut on her forehead using a small mirror hung by the door. It was not deep, but it would leave a bruise. She watched Owen's reflection as she worked, saw him glance at her when he thought she was not looking. Let me see, he said, coming over with a clean cloth and a bottle of whiskey. "This will sting." He dabbed the cut with whiskey-soaked cloth, his touch surprisingly gentle for such rough hands. Margaret held still, very aware of his proximity, the concentration in his expression. His eyes were more green than gray in the lamplight, with small lines at the corners that spoke of days spent squinting into the sun. "You have done this before," she said. "You do not work with horses without learning basic doctoring, on yourself and others. Are you hurt often?" "Less often as I get better at reading them." He finished cleaning the cut and stepped back. "That should heal without trouble. Thank you." She touched the spot gingerly. "You seem to be rescuing me in multiple ways today. Just doing what needs doing." That phrase seemed to sum him up, she thought. A man who saw what needed doing and did it without fuss or expectation of reward. They ate the stew he had mentioned, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. It was simple fare but good, and Margaret realized she had not eaten since breakfast. "Mrs. Hendricks managed a few bites before Owen helped her to the settee bed, where she fell asleep almost instantly. Alone with Owen in the lamplight, Margaret felt suddenly shy. She helped him clean the dishes, working in companionable silence at the dry sink. Their hands brushed as she handed him a bowl to dry, and that small contact sent a jolt through her that she tried to hide. "You should rest," he said. "It has been a difficult day. I am not sure I can sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see those bandits or the coach rolling or—" She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. Owen hung the dish towel to dry and turned to face her. "You are safe here. I promise you that. Scout will alert us if anyone approaches, and I am a light sleeper. Nothing is going to happen to you. I know, I believe you. It is just that my mind will not quiet down." He considered for a moment, then moved to the fireplace and added another log. "My mother used to say that talking helped when the mind was troubled. I am not much for conversation usually, but if it would help, I am willing to listen." Margaret found herself smiling. "You have been doing nothing but talking since we met." "Have I? Had not noticed. What was your mother like?" His expression softened. "Strong, she had to be, following my father west during the gold rush. He died in the mines when I was young, and she raised me and my sister on her own, taking in washing and mending." "You have a sister?" "Had. Emily died of cholera 5 years back. She was 17. The pain in his voice was old but still real. "My mother passed the year after. I think losing Emily broke something in her. I am so sorry." Margaret reached out without thinking and touched his arm. "That must have been terribly hard." "It was. But it taught me that life is precious and short, and you have to build something that matters while you can." He looked around the simple room. "This place, it is what I am building, something permanent, something that will last." "It is a good dream," Margaret said softly. "What is yours?" The question surprised her. No one had ever asked her that before. "I suppose I want to matter. To make a difference, even a small one. That is why I wanted to teach. If I can help children learn, give them tools to build better lives, then maybe my life will have meant something." "That is not a small dream at all. That is a fine dream." They stood there by the fire, and Margaret felt the strangest sense of connection, as if she had known this man far longer than a few hours. She had been raised to be cautious, to guard her heart, to remember her place and station. But here, in this simple ranch house with a man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return, those old rules seemed to matter less. "I should let you rest," Owen said, though he did not move away. "The bedroom is through there. I put fresh linens on last week, and there is water in the pitcher for washing. What about you? I will bank the fire and check on the horses, then bed down in the barn. I will be fine. Thank you, Owen, for everything." He met her gaze, and something flickered in his eyes, something warm and wondering. "You are welcome, Margaret." Hearing her name in his voice did something to her, made her heart beat faster and her skin feel too warm. She forced herself to step back to break the spell of the moment. "Good night," she managed. "Good night." She made it to the bedroom and closed the door before she let herself lean against it, her heart racing. The room was small but neat, with a bed covered in a colorful quilt, a simple dresser, and pegs on the wall for hanging clothes. She could see Owen in this space, could imagine him waking here each morning, dressing in the dark before dawn to tend his horses. She washed using the basin and water pitcher, then realized she had nothing to sleep in. Her nightgown was somewhere in the wreckage of the coach or scattered across the desert. She finally settled on removing her torn and dusty dress and sleeping in her chemise and petticoat. The bed was comfortable, the quilt soft and smelling faintly of sage. Through the small window, she could see stars scattered across the black sky like spilled diamonds. She could hear Owen moving around in the main room, the sound of his boots on the wooden floor, the creak of the door as he went outside. Despite her earlier certainty that she would not sleep, exhaustion pulled at her. Her last thought before drifting off was of strong hands lifting her down from the horse and green-gray eyes looking at her in the lamplight. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment she could not remember where she was, then it all came rushing back. The bandits, the crash, Owen. She sat up, pushing her tangled hair out of her face. Her dress from yesterday was unwearable, still dusty and torn. She opened the bedroom door a crack and peered out. Mrs. Hendricks sat at the table, looking much recovered, talking with Owen as he worked at the stove. He had changed clothes and shaved, and he looked younger, more approachable in the morning light. "I can hear you thinking from here," Mrs. Hendricks called out. "Come and eat, dear. Mr. Harper has been kind enough to prepare breakfast." "I do not have anything to wear," Margaret admitted. "My dress is ruined." Owen turned from the stove, studiously keeping his eyes on her face. "I laid out one of my mother's dresses on the bed. She was about your size. It is plain, but it is clean." Margaret looked back and saw the dress folded on the end of the bed. She had been so focused on looking out that she had not noticed it. "Thank you." She closed the door and examined the dress. It was indeed plain, a simple gray cotton with a high neck and long sleeves, but it was well made and, as he had said, clean. It fit reasonably well, if a bit loose in the waist. She braided her hair simply and emerged to find Owen setting plates on the table. "That is much better," Mrs. Hendricks pronounced. "You look almost human again, dear." Breakfast was bacon, eggs, and fresh bread that Owen admitted he had bought from a neighbor 2 days before. They ate together, and the domesticity of it struck Margaret. She could picture this, mornings like this, sharing meals and conversation in this simple kitchen. The thought should have alarmed her. She barely knew this man, but her heart did not seem to care about propriety or sensible timelines. "I will hitch up the wagon and take you both into Hangtown after breakfast," Owen said. "You can report the robbery to the sheriff and let the stage line know about the coach." "What will happen to our luggage that is still out there?" Margaret asked. "I will ride back this afternoon and collect what I can. With luck, no one will have found it yet." "You have already done so much," Margaret protested. "Like I said, just doing what needs doing." After breakfast, Owen excused himself to prepare the wagon. Mrs. Hendricks helped Margaret clean up the dishes, then gave her a knowing look. "He is a fine young man," the older woman said. "Yes, he is. And he looks at you like you are the sunrise." Margaret felt her cheeks warm. "Mrs. Hendricks, I may be old, but I am not blind, and I have been married twice, so I know what attraction looks like." She patted Margaret's hand. "There is nothing wrong with it, dear. In fact, I think it is rather wonderful. I just met him yesterday." Sometimes that is all it takes. My second husband proposed after knowing me 3 days, and we had 15 happy years together before he passed. She smiled at the memory. The heart knows what it knows. Margaret wanted to dismiss it as foolishness, but she could not, because the truth was, her heart did know. In the space of one evening and one morning, Owen Harper had become important to her in a way that defied logic. The wagon was ready when they emerged from the house. It was a simple farm wagon, but Owen had put down blankets to make the bed more comfortable. He helped them both up, his hand lingering just a moment in Margaret's, then climbed up to the driver's seat. The ride to Hangtown took about an hour and a half at the wagon's pace. The town, when they reached it, was larger than Margaret had expected, still riding high on the gold rush, though the easy pickings were long gone. Brick buildings lined the main street, and people moved with purpose along the wooden sidewalks. Owen pulled the wagon up in front of the sheriff's office. "I will help you with your business here," he said. "Then we need to find the schoolhouse and let them know you are arrived." The sheriff was a grizzled man in his 50s who listened to their story with growing interest. He knew the Bandits by Margaret's description. "That would be the Coltrane gang," he said. "They have been causing trouble between here and Sacramento for months now. We have a wanted poster on them, but they keep slipping away." He looked at Owen with new respect. "You say you put a bullet in one of them, in the shoulder. He should be easy to spot for a few weeks. I will send word to the neighboring counties. Maybe we will get lucky." He turned to Margaret and Mrs. Hendricks. "I am sorry for your trouble, ladies. This is usually a safe route. Thanks to Mr. Harper, we are safe despite it, Mrs. Hendricks said firmly. They left the sheriff's office and made their way to the stage line depot, where Margaret and Mrs. Hendricks gave their account to the agent. He was apologetic and promised to compensate them for their lost belongings, though Margaret knew money could not replace the few precious items she had carried from her old life. Mrs. Hendricks had family in Hangtown and arranged to be taken to them. Before she left, she pulled Margaret aside. "Do not let this one go," she whispered, glancing at Owen, who was waiting by the wagon. "Good men are rare as hen's teeth." "I barely know him," Margaret whispered back, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "Then get to know him. You have time." Mrs. Hendricks hugged her. "Write to me when you are settled. I want to know how this story ends." After Mrs. Hendricks departed, Owen helped Margaret back into the wagon. "The schoolhouse is on the east side of town," he said. "We can head there now if you are ready. I suppose I should meet my employer looking like this." She gestured to her borrowed dress and simply braided hair. "You look fine," Owen said, and something in his voice made her meet his eyes. "You look better than fine." Her breath caught. They were still standing close, his hand still holding hers from helping her up. Around them, the town went about its business, but Margaret felt like they were alone in a bubble of possibility. "Owen," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know," he said softly. "I feel it too." Before either could say more, a voice called out, "Miss Rose, Margaret Rose." They both turned to see a middle-aged woman in a neat dress hurrying toward them, her face bright with relief. "I am Alice Hayward, head of the school board," she said, slightly out of breath. "When the stage did not arrive yesterday, we feared the worst. Are you all right?" Margaret gave an abbreviated version of the story, with Owen filling in the details. Mrs. Hayward's eyes grew wide. How terrifying! But thank goodness Mr. Harper was there. She smiled at Owen warmly. "We all know Owen here. He has done work for several families in town, breaking horses and such. A fine young man." Owen looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just happened to be riding that direction." "Well, Providence or chance, we are grateful." Mrs. Hayward turned back to Margaret. "Let me show you to the teacherage. It is a small cottage behind the school, but it is yours for as long as you teach here, and we must get you some proper clothes. I will speak to Mrs. Chen, who runs the dry goods store. She can help outfit you." "I do not have much money," Margaret admitted. "The school board provides a small allowance for necessities. Do not worry about that now." She looked at the wagon. "Is this all your luggage?" The rest was lost in the crash. "Mr. Harper is going to try to recover what he can." "I will head back this afternoon," Owen confirmed. Mrs. Hayward clucked sympathetically. "What a terrible welcome to our town. Come, let me show you the school and your new home." Margaret looked at Owen, not wanting to leave him but knowing she had to. "Will I see you again?" "I will bring whatever I find from the wreck," he promised. "And I am in town most Saturdays for supplies." "This is Saturday," Mrs. Hayward pointed out helpfully. "So it is." Owen almost smiled. "Then I will be back in town next Saturday." "That is a week away," Margaret said before she could stop herself. This time he did smile, a real smile that transformed his face. "I could come sooner if I had a reason." "I am sure Miss Rose will be getting settled," Mrs. Hayward interjected, oblivious to the current running between them. "But you are always welcome to visit Mr. Harper." "Come, Margaret, let me show you around." Margaret let herself be led away, looking back once to see Owen standing by his wagon, watching her go. He raised his hand in farewell, and she did the same, feeling the distance between them like a physical ache. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building with rows of benches and a large chalkboard at the front. It was clean and well maintained, with maps on the walls and a shelf of books. The teacherage behind it was indeed small, just 2 rooms, a bedroom and a combined sitting room and kitchen, but it was hers. And after months of living under her uncle's critical eye, the privacy was precious. Mrs. Hayward helped her get oriented, showing her where to find water, how the stove worked, where supplies were kept. She brought over a basket of food to tide Margaret over until she could shop properly. "School starts Monday," Mrs. Hayward said. "You will have about 20 students ages 6 to 14. Some are more advanced than others, so you will need to divide your time carefully." "I am looking forward to it," Margaret said honestly. Teaching was what she had trained for, what she wanted to do. "I am sure you will do wonderfully." Mrs. Hayward paused at the door. "And Margaret, about Mr. Harper. He is a good man, but he keeps to himself mostly. If he is showing interest in you, well, that is something special. He has not looked twice at any woman since he arrived here, and goodness knows several have tried to catch his attention." Margaret felt a flush of pleasure at the words. "We only just met." "Sometimes that is all it takes," Mrs. Hayward smiled. "Now rest. You have been through an ordeal. I will come by tomorrow to see how you are settling in." Alone in her new home, Margaret sat on the simple bed and let the events of the past day wash over her. Yesterday morning, she had been on a stagecoach, nervous about her new position but focused on practical matters. Now she was here, safe but shaken, and unable to stop thinking about a rancher with steady hands and kind eyes. She unpacked her carpetbag, the only luggage that had made it with her. It held a few changes of underclothings, her comb and brush, a small Bible that had been her mother's, and a daguerreotype of her parents taken shortly before they died. She set the picture on the small table by the bed, then lay down, intending to rest for just a moment. She woke to darkness and the sound of someone knocking. Disoriented, she stumbled to the door. "Who is there?" "Owen Harper." Her heart leaped. She opened the door to find him standing there with her trunk and several bundles. "You came back," she said, unable to keep the joy out of her voice. "I said I would. May I come in?" She stepped aside, suddenly aware of how improper it was to invite a man into her home, especially at night. But propriety seemed a small thing compared to the happiness of seeing him again. He set the trunk and bundles down. "I got most of it." Some of the books are damaged and I could not find everything, but this is the bulk of what was worth saving. Thank you. She looked at the trunk at him, then back at the trunk. You did not have to do this tonight. You must be exhausted. I wanted to make sure you had what you needed. He shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. And I wanted to see you again. There it was, simple and honest. Margaret felt her pulse quicken. I am glad you came. They stood there in the lamplight, the air between them charged with possibility. Owen took off his hat, turning it in his hands. Margaret, I know this is sudden. I know we only met yesterday, but I cannot stop thinking about you. When you rode behind me, holding on, I felt like you belonged there, like you fit. He paused, searching for words. I am not a man who believes in love at first sight. I have always thought it was foolishness from novels. But then you looked at me in the lamplight last night, and I thought maybe those novels had a point. Margaret's eyes stung with sudden tears. I thought it was just me being foolish. You too? Yes, she laughed, a slightly shaky sound. I keep telling myself it is just gratitude or the shock of what happened, but it does not feel like gratitude. What does it feel like? She stepped closer to him, close enough to touch, like something important, like something that could change everything. He reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I do not have much to offer. A ranch that is more dream than reality, a house that needs work, a life that is mostly hard work and simple pleasures. But if you were willing, I would like to court you properly, to see if this feeling between us is real and lasting. It is real, Margaret whispered. I know it is. So do I. But let us do this right. Let me call on you, take you to church socials, give us time to know each other properly. She leaned into his touch. That sounds wonderful. He smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. Then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft and sweet, a question more than a demand, and Margaret answered by rising on her toes and kissing him back. When they parted, they were both breathing hard. Owen rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he said, before I forget my good intentions. I suppose you should. But neither moved for a long moment. Finally, Owen stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. May I come to see you tomorrow, after church? I could drive you there if you would like. I would like that very much. He put his hat back on, his eyes never leaving her face. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. After he left, Margaret pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Through the window, she watched him ride away into the darkness, and she knew with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. The next morning, Owen arrived in his wagon, cleaned up and wearing what was clearly his Sunday best. He helped her up to the seat beside him, and they rode to the small white church on the hill. People stared as they arrived together, and Margaret could practically see the gossip starting. After the service, Mrs. Hayward introduced Margaret to what felt like half the town. Everyone was friendly, curious about the new teacher and clearly interested in her arrival with Owen Harper. You work fast, Owen, one older man said with a wink. We have been trying to match you up for 3 years. Owen handled the teasing with good humor, keeping Margaret close but not possessively so. They had dinner with Mrs. Hayward and her husband, then Owen drove Margaret back to the teacherage. Will you walk with me? He asked. There is a nice path along the creek. They walked in the late afternoon sun, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his plans for the ranch, how he wanted to build a bigger house eventually, expand his horse operation. She told him about her love of teaching, her hopes for her students. I think you will be wonderful at it, he said. You have a way of making people feel heard, valued. That is a gift. You make me feel brave, she admitted, like I can be more than I thought I could be. He took her hand as they walked. You can be anything you want to be. You already are extraordinary. Over the next weeks, they fell into a pattern. Owen came to town twice a week, taking her on walks, bringing her small gifts. A book he thought she would like, wildflowers from his land, a comb carved from bone that had been his mother's. Margaret threw herself into teaching, finding joy in her students' progress, and counting the hours until she would see Owen again. They were the talk of Hangtown, the new teacher and the solitary rancher, but neither of them cared. What they had was too precious to worry about gossip. One evening, about 2 months after they met, Owen took her back to his ranch for dinner. He had been working on the house, adding a second bedroom, painting the exterior, making it more welcoming. "Why are you doing all this work?" Margaret asked as he showed her around. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I am doing it for us, for the future I hope we will have," her heart stuttered. "Owen, I know it is soon, I know people will say we are rushing, but Margaret, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you. I think I loved you from the moment I saw you standing by that wrecked coach, scared but not broken. Will you marry me?" Joy flooded through her, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes, yes, of course yes." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks, and she kissed him back just as fiercely. "I do not have a ring yet," he said when they came up for air. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes. I do not need a ring, I just need you." They sat on the porch steps as the sun set, making plans. They would marry in the spring, giving her time to finish the school year. She would continue teaching if she wanted, or she could stop and focus on the ranch. It was her choice. "I want to keep teaching," she said, "at least for a while." "I love it. Then you will teach. We will make it work." And they did. They married in April of 1879 in the same church where they had attended their first service together. Mrs. Hayward cried happy tears, and half the town attended. Margaret wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, and Owen wore a new suit he had bought specially for the occasion. As they exchanged vows, Margaret thought back to that terrifying day on the stagecoach, to the moment Owen had ridden into her life. She had thought she was going to die that day, but instead she had found life, real life, the kind that mattered. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch demanded hard work, and Margaret tried to balance teaching with helping Owen when she could. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. In the summer of 1880, Margaret realized she was pregnant. Owen's joy was overwhelming, but so was his worry. "You are going to be fine," he kept saying, as much to himself as to her. "Both of you will be fine." "I know," she said, holding his hand. "We are going to be fine." Their son was born in March of 1881, a healthy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Owen's father. Owen held his son with such tenderness that Margaret fell in love with him all over again. Margaret took a year off from teaching to care for Samuel, and in that time, the ranch thrived. Owen's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and they were able to hire a hand to help with the daily work. They expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. When Margaret returned to teaching, Owen built a small addition to the schoolhouse where Samuel could stay during the day, watched by an older student when Margaret was teaching. It was unconventional, but it worked for them. In 1883, their daughter was born, a tiny, fierce thing they named Emily, after Owen's sister. Then came Thomas in 1885, and finally Ruth in 1888. Their house was full of noise and laughter, of children's voices and running feet. Margaret eventually stopped teaching to focus on raising their family, but she never stopped loving education. She taught her children at home, filling their minds with books and ideas. Owen taught them about the land, about horses, about hard work and integrity. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Margaret back to the place where the stagecoach had wrecked. Someone had put up a marker for the driver who had died, and they stood there together, remembering. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I had not been riding that way that day?" Owen asked. "All the time," Margaret admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I even knew you." He pulled her close. "I was riding back from Sacramento, where I had gone to look at some breeding stock. If I had left a day earlier or later, if I had taken a different route, if I had stopped for lunch instead of riding through." He shook his head. "It feels like fate." "Maybe it was," Margaret said. "Or maybe we just got very, very lucky. I prefer to think it was fate, that we were meant to find each other." She turned in his arms to look at him. 10 years had added some gray to his hair and deepened the lines around his eyes, but to her he was still the man who had ridden to her rescue, steady and true. "I love you," she said, "more with each passing year. And I love you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They stood there in the California sunshine, on the spot where their story had begun, and Margaret sent up a silent prayer of thanks for bandits and stagecoaches and cowboys who rode to the rescue. Over the years, the ranch continued to grow. Owen became known throughout California as one of the best horse trainers in the state. Their children grew strong and capable, learning from both parents. Samuel showed his father's gift with horses, while Emily had her mother's love of learning. Thomas was the dreamer, always sketching and imagining, and Ruth was the practical one, keeping them all organized. In 1895, when Margaret was 38 and Owen was 42, they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. The house had been expanded again, now a proper ranch house with 6 bedrooms and a wraparound porch. The barn had been rebuilt, larger and sturdier. The corrals held some of the finest horses in the state. "You ever miss teaching?" Owen asked. Margaret considered. "Sometimes. But I would not trade this for anything. This life we have built, our children, this is better than anything I could have imagined that day I left Sacramento. Even with the bandits," she laughed. "Especially with the bandits. If not for them, you would have ridden right past that stagecoach. I like to think I would have stopped anyway. Pretty woman like you, I would have found an excuse. You did not even know what I looked like. Did not need to. I am sure I would have known you anywhere, in any circumstance." She leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders with the ease of long practice. "We have been lucky, Owen, so very lucky." "Luck and hard work," he agreed. "And love, never forget the love." As if summoning them, their children came running to the porch. Samuel, now 14, wanted to show his father a new technique he had been working on with the yearlings. Emily, 12, had finished a book and wanted to discuss it with her mother. Thomas, 10, had a new drawing to share, and Ruth, 7, just wanted to sit on her father's lap and tell him about her day. Owen and Margaret looked at each other over their children's heads, sharing a smile of perfect understanding. This was what they had built, what they continued to build every day. A family, a home, a life filled with purpose and love. In 1902, when Samuel married a nice girl from Sacramento and brought her home to the ranch, Margaret and Owen stood together at the wedding, their other children around them. Thomas had gone off to San Francisco to study art, but he had come home for his brother's wedding. Emily was courting a teacher from the school where she now worked, and Ruth was just starting to notice boys, much to Owen's dismay. Where did the time go? Margaret wondered aloud. I do not know, Owen admitted, but I am grateful for every minute of it. As the years passed, they became grandparents. Samuel and his wife had 3 children who loved to visit the ranch and learn about horses from their grandfather. Emily married her teacher and they settled in Hangtown, giving Margaret and Owen 2 more grandchildren. Thomas never married. content with his art and his studio in San Francisco, but he visited often and doted on his nieces and nephews. Ruth surprised everyone by marrying a lawyer and moving to Sacramento, where she became active in women's suffrage, making her mother intensely proud. In 1915, Owen and Margaret celebrated their 36th anniversary. They were both in their late 50s now, their hair more gray than not, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and good years. But when Owen looked at Margaret, he still saw the frightened young woman who had ridden behind him on his horse, her arms tight around his waist. "Do you remember," he said one evening as they sat on the porch, "that first ride, when I brought you and Mrs. Hendricks to the ranch? Every detail," Margaret said. "I remember thinking I never wanted to let go." "You told Mrs. Hayward that," Margaret laughed. "I did not tell anyone. But I thought it. You made me feel so safe, so protected. And when we got to your ranch and you helped me down, I wanted to climb right back up on that horse and hold on forever. You should have. Would have saved me weeks of proper courting. But the courting was lovely." "It was," he agreed. "Though I would have married you that first night if you had let me." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have had a good life, Owen Harper." "The best life," he corrected. "And it is not over yet." He was right. They had many more good years together. They saw the automobile come to Hangtown, watched the world change in ways they could never have imagined as young people. They adapted, as they always had, making room for the new while honoring the old. In 1925, on a warm spring day, Owen Harper died peacefully in his sleep, his hand held in Margaret's. He was 72 years old, and he had lived every day of his life with purpose and love. Margaret grieved him deeply, but she did not break. She had their children and grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren too. She had the ranch, which Samuel ran now with his own son. She had her memories, precious and clear as crystal. She lived another 10 years, dying in 1935 at the age of 78. Her last words were of Owen, calling his name as if she could see him waiting for her. They buried her next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under an oak tree they had planted together 40 years before. Their children and grandchildren gathered there, sharing stories of the couple who had built this legacy. "Tell us again," one great-grandchild asked Samuel. "How did they meet?" And Samuel, old now himself, told the story he had heard 100 times. The bandits, the rescue, the ride to the ranch. The way his father had known instantly that his mother was the one, and how his mother had felt the same. The love that had sustained them through decades and children and the building of something that would last. "Your great-grandmother used to say," Samuel told the child, "that she rode behind your great-grandfather that day and never wanted to let go. And she never did. She held on to him until the very end, and I like to think she is holding on to him still, wherever they are now." The child looked at the two headstones, side by side under the oak tree, and smiled. It was a good story, the best kind of story, one that was true and full of love. Years later, when the ranch finally passed out of the family and became a state park, the rangers would tell visitors about the couple who had founded it. They would point to the old house, carefully preserved, and to the oak tree on the hill. They would tell the story of a cowboy who saved a woman from bandits, and how that single act of courage had led to a love that lasted a lifetime. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, people swore they could see two figures on the porch of the old house, sitting close together, watching the sunset just as they had done for more than 30 years. A cowboy and his wife, still together, still in love, their story woven into the land itself. It was a story of chance and choice, of courage and love. It was the story of Owen and Margaret Harper, and it was a story that would never be forgotten as long as the oak tree stood and the wind blew across the California hills. Their love had been tested by time and hardship, by loss and change, and it had endured. It had flourished and grown, putting down roots as deep as that oak tree, spreading branches to shelter generations. In the end, it was a simple story. A man saw someone who needed help and he helped. A woman found safety in his strength and strength in his gentleness. They chose each other, again and again, through all the years and all the challenges. They built a life together that mattered, that left the world better than they found it. And it all began with a terrified woman clinging to a cowboy's back, riding away from danger toward a future neither could have imagined, unwilling to ever let go of the safety and love she had found in his presence. That grip, both literal and metaphorical, had sustained them through everything. And in the end, not even death could make Margaret Rose Harper let go of Owen Harper, the man who had saved her life and then taught her how to live it. Their story lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that bore their name, in the memories passed down through generations. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, two souls who had found each other against all odds were still together, still loving, still grateful for that day on a dusty California road when fate brought them together, and they chose never to part. The end.